You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us. This is episode 5 of the podcast. We're really excited about this episode. We're basically going to be talking about the hidden cost of real estate. It's very similar. Like, for example, I don't know about you guys. I'm very into knowing what I'm walking into. There's no way of knowing everything, but I like to know, like, for example, when you buy a car, some cars need like premium gas or like synthetic oil. And those are added costs that are going to be on you whenever you buy that car. And it's kind of one of those, it is what it is things, but it's kind of nice to know. And so it's the same thing with real estate. Like when you buy a house, there's the obvious costs that are there, like the down payment and whatnot. But there's also a lot of these hidden costs. So today we're going to be touching on some of the things that are going to be hidden costs. My name is Sajan Abraham. I'm here joined with Siju Koshi. Thanks again for clicking and joining us. Before we get started, Siju, how's everything going, man? How's life?
Going good, brother. New year started.
Yeah.
We're kind of back on the grind. Work, everything, real estate's kind of pushing through. So we're just starting the year off, and just hopefully we can do this right,
Good.
this time.
Did you survive Snowmageddon?
Yeah, barely made it out, dude. I was debating there. I was almost snowed in for.
We're based out of a suburb of Houston, and like we don't get snow. That's not a thing here.
We still didn't get snow.
We didn't get any snow. We got nothing. I mean, like North Texas, Central Texas got some, but we got nothing. We got wet rain,
Yeah.
cold, wet, whatever. So it wasn't really that great, but it is what it is.
Yep. No, everything's good, brother. I mean, we're just hanging in there, man. Yeah.
Good, dude. That's good to hear, man. It's the same here. Like we're just kind of trucking along. So, but yeah, let's get started, man. So, I guess Siju, just off the bat, like, what are some costs that might not be so obvious when you're getting into the real estate game?
Yeah, and I think you hit it, and you said it may be nice to know some of these costs. I think you have to know some of these costs, right? Like, I mean, to get into especially something like real estate, which is so money intensive, right? And it's a big chunk of an investment you're putting into. I think it's very important that you know all costs involved, right? And I think this episode is really good in calling it the hidden costs of real estate because a lot of people don't factor that into it, right? So there's going to be about 5 to 6 costs that I'm going to talk about, like at least from the closing or purchasing of a real estate property that's gonna factor in. That's big actually, because when you're talking about cash flowing for property, you want to make sure you have everything that you're gonna have to pay out of your pocket covered, right?
Right.
I mean, the rent better cover all that. And then anything more than that is what your surplus is.
Right.
So the biggest one is taxes. A lot of people fail to look and see what the tax rate is in their area for the property that they're buying. And now this can range anywhere from let's just say $100,000 property can cost you $3,000 in taxes to a high-end school district or high-end area where it's 5 and 6% taxes, right? So you're talking about thousands of dollars every year you have to pay in taxes, which you have to accumulate for. A lot of people don't take that into factor.
Right.
And so that's your biggest, I think, hidden cost that people don't take into fact.
Sure. Well, just to piggyback on that, like my first property, not my first, the properties that we lived in were in a better school district, so the taxes were higher. When we turned that into a rental, I was naive at that time. I didn't really think about it. And I still don't regret it. I don't regret the fact that we made it a rental, but it really plays into a factor as far as how much profit you're walking away with. You'll still be profitable. But when you look at other properties where the tax rates are way lower, I mean, the margins are so much bigger. So Siju's on point when it comes to taxes. It's a big deal. It's a big deal on where you purchase. And it's a fine line to dance, right? Because you want to be in a space where people want to live. And typically where people want to live are good school districts and all that jazz. So that means higher taxes. Yep. But as long as the numbers make sense, then it's all good. But it's just something that you really need to consider.
Agreed. And again, in taxes, the other thing with taxes, you can either pay it out at the end of the year, right? Or you can escrow them into your monthly note. And generally, I like to escrow them into our monthly note. That way I know the full amount that's coming out each month for the house. The next big cost is insurance, right? Insurance on your property. Of course, you buy a house, you have to insure it. If something happens, or fire, flood, anything, you have to make sure you factor in insurance for it. And there's multiple insurances we have to kind of think about, right? So there's On the mortgage side, there's something called PMI. So if you don't put 20% down, which most times investment properties, they ask you to put 20% down, so you don't have to worry about that mortgage insurance. But if you're not, if you're paying anything less than 20%, they'll charge you a 1 to 2% mortgage insurance, right? So the insurance that I'm primarily talking about is property, though. So property is again, for a rainy day, for anything that happens in a fire, flood, catastrophe on the actual building itself, you need to have insurance. And that, on 100,000 property, I just ballpark some of these numbers, is about, 12 to 1,500 a year, right? So it can be $100, $125 again, on top of your normal note. These costs, they add up, right? So you have taxes, that's a couple hundred, insurance, that's another 100. So instead of just taking just the mortgage itself, you gotta think these fees tack on itself, right? And it's gonna be all in, I would say probably another 300 to 400 just on an average $100,000 to $150,000 house.
For sure. And to touch on that as well, taxes and insurance typically can be escrowed into your mortgage payment.
Yep.
And so I'm actually just now starting to do the non-escrow route on some of the properties. And it makes you feel like, oh my gosh, the margins are huge. Like if I'm just paying principal and interest, it's like, oh wow, like I'm making a lot of profits. But then since this is my first year, I'm really feeling it out. I have a gauge of what the insurance and taxes are going to be, but still it's like you need to allocate that money. Like it's not something you could just spend, right? Yep. And so whether you escrow it, it's kind of, it gives you less of a headache when you escrow, because your all-in number is this much and my rent needs to be higher than that. But you have the ability to escrow it just to make it a little bit less of a headache.
For sure. And as we go down our fees, hidden fees, the next big, so I'm going from largest to smallest. HOA fees are going to be another big one. Depending on if it's a house, HOA fees are pretty nominal. If you're not, again, this varies from area to area. If you're in a high-end area, big amenities like pools, parks, things like that in your area, HOA fees are generally going to be higher, right?
Right.
Most reasonable rentable areas are going to be in the $300 to $400 a year range for HOAs. And the one thing I like to kind of let people know is that, especially with condos, townhomes, if you guys are investing in those kind of properties, this can be a big kicker that actually can eat into your profits, because they actually charge almost $200 to $300, maybe even $400 a month in HOA fees, because you in a condo, the actual building itself is being insured, maintained by the condo facilities, the people, the apartment, right? So they have to collect their funds, right? So if you're thinking about investing in condos and townhomes, that's a big hidden fee. So just make sure when you run your numbers, it has to factor in those HOA fees. So housing is generally about 300 to 400 in the medium range whenever you're talking about HOA fees.
Right.
And then of course you have your legal fees whenever you're closing on a property, which is just the underwriting, paperwork, law firms that are involved in drafting the paperwork, and then realtor fees. Realtor fees is meaning whoever found the property for you, you have to pay them, right? And vice versa. If you sell the property, you have to actually pay that. Or if you even rent a property out and using a realtor, you're gonna have to pay them at least a 1 month's rent for finding that good tenant or whoever else is going to be occupying the property.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's definitely the realtor fees is and I'm not saying it's like, oh man, you have to pay the realtor fees. Like they work for it and they deserve that money, but it's something that you need to factor in. Like for example, I exclusively use a realtor to find tenants because I know my realtor does an amazing job. Like he's done a great job thus far finding me good tenants. So I'm happy to pay that 1 month of rent just to make sure that that's covered, and that's one less headache for me. But it is a fact that it's eating into my profits, and so it's one thing that I don't want it to be a yearly thing, right? So that's why I want to have like a good tenant that's going to be there for multiple years, and it kind of makes it worthwhile paying that 1 month rent.
Oh yeah, and all these fees you can generate ballpark. Again, this is where researching, right? And I think we iterate this on all our shows. I think we'll do another show just on actually calculating the numbers themselves, just doing some sample data sets, because I think actually seeing it will actually put it into perspective. But again, running the numbers, and I think Saj mentions it, he kind of looks in a certain area. I kind of do the same thing, right? I look in certain areas. I know the price points I'm looking for. And once you've done researching on quite a few properties, you'll have a ballpark idea of what these costs are going to be, and they're generally about the same in those areas. So that's the way I kind of look at it.
No, definitely. I feel like that's the best way to do it, just to, hone in on a spot and kind of know the area. Like I think that's when you run analysis, you build that muscle in your mind. Like, oh, I know what it's going to cost over here. So that way you feel more comfortable. And I think at the end of the day, you need to be comfortable with what you're investing in. And to get comfortable, you have to know all the numbers. You have to know what you're walking yourself into.
Absolutely, absolutely. So now on that, I mean, we have the hidden costs when you're buying this property, right? So there's a ton of costs that a lot of people don't take into factor after you acquired it, right? So you have things that, again, the buck doesn't stop when you buy the property, right? I mean, the tenant's not taking care of the house. So what are some things that you have seen in your experience that are costs that should be accounted for, at least from a if you're managing the property yourself, what are things that you should at least account for, just for things to handle with the property once you've acquired it?
Sure. Yeah. So I think generally speaking, there's a term called capital expenditures, or also called CapEx. These are big ticket items, such as like your down payment. So that's kind of associated to purchasing. But there's also like big ticket items that are going to last for a long time and you can depreciate. If you replace a dishwasher, or like general repairs to the house that are going to add value to the house, that would be considered a capital expenditure. And so like an AC unit, that's a capital expenditure, but you're paying a lot of money up front, but it lasts you for many, many years, right? So HVAC, like dishwashers, appliances, things like that would be, I would consider a capital expenditure, because you have to just be prepared for it. So when you look at a house and you walk through it and stuff, and you look at that oven and you're like, oh, that oven's old, so I got to prepare for replacing that oven. Like that would be considered a capital expenditure. So that's something you got to look at. Sometimes, like you buy a brand new house, like a make ready, it's already done for you. So you don't have to consider that much, you don't have to allocate that much money for capital expenditures. But when you buy an older house, like my goal is to buy older houses that need to be repaired, because I feel like there's more value there. And so I take care of the capital expenditures on the front end when I'm renovating everything, right? So I walk into a property, and so that way I knock it all out on the front end, and then I buy myself years. Like the roof is a capital expenditure. If I replace the roof, I know I have like 25, maybe 20, 25 years before I have to worry about it again. Same thing with like a dishwasher or things of that nature, right? So that's something to consider. Home insurance, I know we talked about that when we purchase, but also home insurance, when you talk about the areas that you're in, it varies. So like I've recently been looking into trying to get into Galveston, like near water, right? And it's a huge difference when it comes to insurance, because there's flooding that might be involved. There's the wear and tear of your property because of the salt water that's in the air.
Oh yeah.
It deteriorates things. And that's something I did not know about. But when you do your research, you have to, factor in, like, I'm just making up numbers, but let's say insurance for a house in the burbs of Houston are like $3,000. Over there, it might be $5,000 or $6,000, right? I mean, just because the bank needs to protect themselves, and that's what they want, that extra insurance. And so that's kind of what it is. So when you're looking at the different markets that you're trying to get into, you really need to be mindful of that.
I think you hit it right on the nail. So like we live in Houston, again, you mentioned that, but the thing is we have flood prone areas, right? So I've actually put flood policies, which is an additional insurance on top of what you're normally paying. So if you're paying $1,500 for home insurance, again, FEMA flood insurance ranges from anywhere from $400 to $500, maybe even $600, depending on where you're at. So that's another cost that's kind of hidden. Again, it's up to you as an owner how you want to protect yourself. But we've been through many of these here in Houston, and we've seen the causes. And if you're willing to have the money for it, to come out of your pocket,
right?
If it does happen, right, it's a risk you're willing. It depends on how much risk you're willing to tolerate, right? But that's another hidden cost. Flood insurance is huge. It's another $500 a year.
Right. Yeah. It's a big deal, and like it goes back to the whole peace of mind. Like sometimes you're in a flood zone, the bank is going to force you to get flood insurance. Like it's just what it is. But there's some areas, like Siju was talking about, like in Houston, some areas that never flooded before flooded, and so sometimes you just want to have that extra protection, because that's a lot of money if your house floods, to replace all the flooring and replace all the sheetrock and all that kind of stuff. So it's a peace of mind, but you're paying for it. And so again, like if the numbers work, then go for it. If the numbers don't work, then you either take that risk or you move on to the next property as far as like when you're trying to purchase something. So that's the home insurance, touch of it. And then there's also repairs. Generally speaking, like there's going to be repairs, like, just wear and tear on the house. Toilets are going to leak, faucets are going to have to be replaced, things like that. So you want to be able to allocate some type of money for that on an ongoing basis, just because it's going to happen. It's not a if, it's a when. So you have to allocate money for that. Over the years, I remember early on when I would get a call for a repair, I would just be like, oh my gosh, like that's another X amount of dollars I got to pay to fix this. But now as time has progressed, I don't care anymore. I'm just like, it's a part of the game. I've allocated the money for it. So it kind of gives you a peace of mind when walking into it, that toilet is going to have to be fixed. That faucet is going to have to be replaced. And you have the money allocated for it. When that call does come, you're ready. You're already ready to make the call to the repair guy to make it happen. So yeah, it's as long as you are prepared financially to take care of that, but you have to mentally.
Let me ask you a question. So how much do you allocate for repairs themselves? Like, what do you have a rule of thumb you go by on repairs? Like, do you put a certain amount aside every month for repairs? Like, what do you follow?
I try to keep a certain amount of money for each property for those type of repairs. Like, I think I'm at like 5,000 per property. And so that doesn't mean like 5,000 sitting in an account doing nothing. That could be 5,000 sitting in my 401k that I have access to, right? Yeah. Or that could be 5,000 in some kind of account where I could just pull that money or just have access to that money. I don't want to go into debt fixing something, so I want to have liquid cash where I could, reach it. But I don't want that cash just in there doing nothing, right? So it could be earning money somewhere else. But so in my mind, mentally, I want to have 5,000 per property because if something comes up, I want to be able to have cash to pay it,
Definitely.
But cash on hand, if you have a couple thousand, per year for each house, I think you'll be more than enough. You'll be more than safe, when little things come up, right? Because, like when a faucet gets broken and stuff like that, you're not paying thousands of dollars for replacing a faucet, right? It's a couple hundred. So, when you hire somebody else to do it, right? Or you can do it yourself, right? There's a lot of options to save money.
But when how big that faucet is, unless the pipe breaks.
That's true. That's true. If the pipe, which has happened to me, I've had pipes break under the foundation where we had to replace a bunch of stuff. And so those are things that you have to be mindful of when it comes to repairs, but that's why you should have like funds somewhere to touch on when you need that money. Moving forward, vacancies is something that needs to be considered when you're thinking of these hidden costs. If a house is on the market for like many months, that you're paying for that insurance, you're paying for that mortgage, you're paying for even like turning on the electricity and water and heat and gas. You have to turn that stuff on so when people view the house, they could see the light, they could turn on the lights, they can know that the heat works, they can know that the AC is running, they can know that the water faucets are running. So those are costs that are it's not huge. If you've allocated enough money to run the shop, but it's a little annoying, right? Like when let's say, for example, someone moves out of my house and I put it up on the market, I have to immediately turn on all the utilities so that when people are going into showing, they could see that everything is working. And so that's money out of my pocket to be able to turn that stuff on. Again, it's not like crazy amounts of money, but it's still something to consider. So vacancies or something. And then the months that they are vacant, you're paying for everything. So that's why it's important on the front end to really get a good tenant that's going to stay there for a long time, because those turnaround, and I guess going to the next item, turnaround cost. Like the longer someone stays there, it's great, but the more wear and tear that's going to be on a property. I had a tenant live in a house for, I think it was 5 years, and that was awesome because they paid on time and everything was good. And it's just over time, there's wear and tear on the house. Like the walls became very dirty, the floors got stained. So when they moved out, I made a ton of money on them because it was 5 years of rent. But I had to spend a good chunk of money to replace all the flooring, to paint all the walls and all that stuff.
So funny story on wear and tear. I had a guy live in a house because it was between floods, right? In one of my houses, he had 8 kids. So imagine the wear and tear, right? So it's. I needed somebody in the house, right? And so we actually got him in there, but he was actually in there only for 6 months. Granted, he did keep the house pretty well, and it was redone before he got in there. But just imagine 8 kids running through a house. You can't stop the stuff that the kids do, right?
Right.
Paint's going to be just falling off the wall. They're touching everything. I mean, so you get those turnover costs it's crazy, but we don't think about these, but these are small things that, we have to kind of factor in almost every dollar when it comes to these. So it's a great point.
Yeah. And it's not like these are bad people. It's just like, I look at my own house. I have kids and like, there's wear and tear on this house. Like there are walls that need to be painted. There's some floors that have stains. It's just kind of what it is. Right.
Agreed.
But you just walk into it knowing like, hey man, like these are costs that we need to cover. And to be honest, like I happily cover that because it's increasing the value of my house. It's making it more attractive for the next tenant whenever I do those turnarounds. It's not fun to pay those, bills when you have to replace the flooring and all that stuff. But when you quickly get it rented out, like it all kind of goes hand in hand, right? You spend the money to make it look nice, so it's not on the market for many days. And then, you get a new tenant in there that's good, that wants to live in there and take care of it. Like, but those are things that need to be considered when you're getting to this. And really, because of all those things that I listed, it kind of honed into what type of property I want. Like, for example, like talking about painting the walls. That seems like a little thing, but if the walls are 2-story and there's a lot of walls, it costs a lot more. So if you have like a smaller home that you could paint quickly, it just costs much less. If you have 5 bathrooms, that's a lot of faucets and a lot of toilets that need to be replaced or fixed or whatever. So if you have 2 or 2.5 bath house, it kind of makes it a little bit nicer. There are trade-offs in that because the bigger the house, you might be able to pull more rent, but it's just, what are you willing to deal with, right? And so because of these things that we've kind of walked through, it kind of honed in on what type of property I like to manage. So like, I guess, Siju, what do you think? Is there anything else that we should add or any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think this really just highlights the importance of running numbers, right? I mean, you really have to run not just the mortgage you owe every month, not just, that can't be the end all be all, right? You have all these factors that we just discussed, right? I mean, because you're talking about these fees I think we listed are probably going to be close to even double what your mortgage is generally, I would say. What would you say?
So I've noticed, so we talk about principal, interest, the PITI, right? Principal, interest, tax, insurance, right? Principal and interest are typically the same or less than the taxes and insurance. So when I started escrowing, I saw that, it was this number. And then when I didn't escrow, it was literally half. And so, you have to allocate like half of your mortgage and interest when you think about, and that's only talking about insurance and taxes, right? So consider HOA fees. You have to consider like the closing costs and CapEx and all the home insurance, like all those things, repairs. I would say, yeah, you're right, man. Like it would be pretty much double
your mortgage, in most cases, let's just say, right? And so that's the importance of it. At the end of the day, you want to rent and make it an investment where you can make money off of it and not something where it's going to be, deter. At the end of the day, if you have to pay HOA fees, it's going to come out of your pocket, right? So, I mean, you don't want to be under, right? Whenever you make these, because it's an investment. It's not supposed to be something that's going to put you in debt. So that's the importance of looking through these. And I think, it's very important. You have to make sure you take factor into that.
Sure. And I also want to mention, like, don't let all of this stuff deter you from investing, because like when I first started, I was negative $50. Like I was paying $50 to have the house rented. And like on the surface, I was like, oh, that's a bummer. Like I'm not really making any money per month, but you are making equity. Like someone else is paying for a great majority of your mortgage, So like, although there's fees to be considered, this is just a guideline. And honestly, we probably didn't cover everything else that's out there. Like these are just like highlights that we kind of know that we've experienced, right? So there might be more out there, but overall, it's still beneficial for you to actually dive into this game if you're willing to play in the market, So it's don't let all this stuff scare you from getting your first deal and getting a property and being a landlord.
Agreed.
Cool, man. So I think that wraps up today's episode. I think it was a good one. I hope you found it helpful. Let us know what you think. Again, like we want this to be a conversation. Like if we missed something, please leave it in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are on all of it, right? And if you have questions or concerns, like whatever we know. And again, like I don't want to sit here and pretend like we're the experts and we know everything. But whatever we do know, we want to share. with the hope that you will share as well. Like, we want to learn as well. So please, like, let this be a conversation.
Open forum.
Yes, open
And
forum.
if there's new topics, anything that I want to be, that's, I'd like to even, if it's something I like to do research on and learn more about it, and we can discuss it, I'm open to that too,
For sure. So share as much as you want to share, man. We're ready to hear. So again, thanks for joining us, and I guess we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajan. Be sure to tune in next time.